Let's check the mic, guys, if you're happy.
Main mic testing, main mic testing. Yo. You want me to say? What do you want me to say? You want me to tell you how much I had? What?
Oh, I don't see this mic.
You should have this one. You should see it now.
Buffo, who guys sound there?
You
On move.
Yeah, can you pick it up?
I keep holding. What do you pick up?
It's big. You can't, you know.
And then after all the
No, still nothing. There's nothing. Can you see me? There's mic.
Yeah,
It should be. It was there. I was reading
Buffo,
it.
outside need a Mustang cable here split.
I think I need them for archive.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Can you, production, can you hear him on this
I
mic?
can get footage.
Welcome to the South African government update on the security situation prevailing in the country. Minister in the Presidency, Acting, Ms. Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, will give the update. Thank you. Minister.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Since the media briefing of yesterday afternoon, there have been a number of developments regarding the security situation, mainly in Gauteng and Kwazulu-Natal. We are pleased with the reports that Gauteng province is largely calm and that there have been fewer incidences overnight and this far. Only 6 incidences were reported. This has been largely due to increased deployment of the South African National Defence Force, SABC members and Metro Police in areas which have been identified as potential hotspots. Last night and today we have arrested 139 additional, which makes a cumulative total of arrests in Gauteng 725. To date, the SAPS has received reports of 26 deaths cumulatively in Gauteng related to the violence. However, 6 bodies were discovered on the roof of Tembisa South Mall in Tembisa, and an inquest has been opened. We need to clarify that these deaths are not related to the incidents of violence. The communities in Gauteng supporting the metro municipalities have also started with the cleanup campaigns of vandalized facilities. The situation in KwaZulu-Natal remains volatile, but much improved, is moving towards stability. Overnight, to over 2 hours ago, 39 incidences have been reported and an additional 392 arrests made, which makes the cumulative number of arrests 1,478. Reported deaths that have been verified as linked to the violence are cumulatively 91 in KZN. The provincial commissioners of the South African Police Service have in the meantime activated sub-social crime prevention strategy and have been engaging with various stakeholders, including community-based organizations, traditional leaders, and the business community in order to amplify current operational plans to best tackle the looting and destruction of property currently prevalent in Gauteng and KZN. Though today there have not been incidences in Gauteng outside of the 6 that I've reported earlier. The government would like to commend the collaboration between the police and the community through established platforms such as community policing forums and Community in Bloom. We also noted that there are reports of some armed community members brandishing firearms and or dangerous weapons publicly in an apparent retaliation against perpetrators of the public violence. Government would like to caution the public that although persons are entitled to protect their property and lives, as long as this is done in a manner that everyone's right to life is protected as provided for in our Constitution and can only be infringed in extremely limited circumstances, inter alia, in order to protect life or bodily integrity of the one who's being attacked. We do not want a situation where members of the public are at loggerheads with the law after their attempts to protect their communities, their properties, and their own lives. So we are pleading that do not infringe on the right of others and do not take the law into your own hands. Your work or your efforts in protecting your properties and your communities must be done with the Community Policing Forum or the Community in Blue as they work within the established SABS frameworks. The ministers in the Justice, Crime Prevention and Safety Cluster or Security Cluster are currently in KwaZulu-Natal and working with the provincial government under the leadership of Premier Zikalala to assess and monitor the situation on the ground and attend to arising issues. Of concern to us as a government are the reports of racial tensions in areas such as Phoenix in Durban. The ministers have visited the area and engaged various stakeholders to resolve racial tensions. Furthermore, members of the South African National Defence Force and the South African Police Service have been deployed in the area to restore law and order in that place. We call on all South Africans involved in altercations to bridge the racial barriers and work together towards a common goal of protecting South Africa. Government is also concerned about the economic impact of the violence, looting, and destruction of infrastructure. Over the past few days, the main routes have been blocked by protesters with stones and other dangerous items. Of concern is the effect on the supply value chain and movement of goods from Durban and Richards Bay ports to various destinations. The members of the South African National Defence Force have been deployed specifically to protect the national key points, and SABs are providing escorts for the transportation of supplies such as oxygen, medicines, and other key goods that have to reach all parts of the country. We wish to address those who are still undertaking the road blockade to desist from doing so, because it is the poor, the vulnerable, and marginalized who will suffer as a result of their actions. The impact of the looters' actions will be felt more by the poor and the middle class, as many more people stand a chance of losing their livelihoods. Ministers in the economic and infrastructure cluster have been working with industry to ensure the restoration of supply chains, movements of goods, and the restoration of ports operations. The Net Joints is working tirelessly to ensure the reopening of the N2 and N3 to ensure the movement of goods. We would also like to thank the community members who have started the cleanup operations in the places where they've been destroyed and vandalized. We are also encouraged by members of the community who are volunteering to put their hands on deck to ensure that the country is back to normal and economic activity resumes as soon as possible. These members of the community are true patriots and they take pride in their country. We call upon various sectors who provide support services to the vulnerable members of society to join hands and work with government to ensure that no one goes hungry during these difficult times. The social cluster has started various support programs to ensure that affected communities get the support they need. We would like to extend government's appreciation to members of the public across various sectors who have offered to contribute to the ensuring of food security and that no one of the vulnerable go hungry. In conclusion, government extends messages of condolences for those who have lost their lives during these violent protests and looting, irrespective of the circumstances under which their lives have been lost. The loss of lives is regrettable. We have already received some questions on the deployment of the 25,000 soldiers. The specifics are that by this morning, 10,000 boots were already on the ground, and which is an increment of 5,000 from yesterday morning. This is not the largest internal deployment. The largest internal deployment of the South African National Defence Force was for them to assist with the management of our first phase of COVID-19 disaster management, wherein over 70,000 boots were deployed on the ground. The other question which we want to clarify before we deal with the questions of today, which was raised yesterday equally, is the question around the 12 alleged instigators. We want to report that one is already in custody, and the South African Police Service tracking team has increased the surveillance of the remaining 11. We thank you. We can have the questions.
Thank you, Minister. I think most of the questions been raised here are those ones have been raised yesterday, but I'll just take few, if you may, Minister. The one is from the Alex Winning from Reuters News Agency, and he would like to ask that yesterday in Parliament, the Defence Minister said her ministry had submitted a request for a deployment of about 25,000 soldiers. Could you say whether the President has authorized the deployment of 25,000 members of the SANDF, or if not, how many SANDF members? Will those be soldiers, i.e. on the ground, or does that also include support staff? And Amanda Amanda Watson from The Citizen asks, please, may we have a total number of incidents since the outbreak on Saturday to date?
Sorry, you are repeating the questions that are covered on the statement. So those
Yeah.
questions don't deal with the questions that have been covered, including the first one around the deployment of soldiers. It has been covered on the statement.
Thank you, Minister. I don't know if I can continue, Minister.
Go ahead,
No.
please.
Carol Payton from Business Day. So I think even this one is the question that's been raised yesterday is around Thulani Dlomo, who has been widely named as being among the instigators of violence. Do you know where Mr. Dlomo is? Have you interviewed him? Have you put out a notice to prevent him from leaving the country? And then from another one from Susan Janji from AFP. Could the minister clarify if the 26 deaths in Gauteng are cumulative or just from overnight? And what is the total cumulative death toll for the two provinces? I think I can stop there, Minister, for now.
Thank you. The question on the deployment was covered extensively on the statement. They will have access to the statement and they will find the details. Safe to clarify that the deployment of the South African National Defence Force is authorized only by the Commander-in-Chief, who is the President of the Republic. And the question on Mr. Thulani Dlomo, I do not know whether Mr. Thulani Dlomo is part of the 11 instigators or 12 instigators. The police are investigating, and I cannot comment on the specificity around one individual, and no one can comment because that compromises the investigations, and we want to plead that that question, if it comes, we won't deal with it again. It's not up to us as government or also the police to announce who has been arrested. It's only when people have appeared before the court and been charged that there can be an announcement of the names of those who have been arrested and charged. So we will plead with the media not to ask questions about individuals because that compromises investigations. And the numbers I've indicated in the statement, the details are there. The numbers we have reported are cumulative numbers. So I'm sure journalists could do the maths between 26 and 91.
Thank you, Minister. I have a question from Erin Bates from Business Day. It says, ministers, including Deputy Minister Zizukodwa, Minister Dlodlo, and yourself, have referred to the 12 people suspected of stoking tensions. Have you verified social media messages calling for targeting strategist sites? How much of the unrest is the consequence of active political stalking by underground forces? And I have another one from Mendy from 702. What is the status of reopening of the entry highway and restoring crucial supply chain routes, getting basic supplies, fuel, and etc. into KZN and crops to the ports for export? Okay, and then I have another question, Minister, from Jan de Lange. It says that sources in food supply chain says present basic food supply will run out within the next 24 hours, whilst it takes 7 to 10 days in the best case scenario to get new suppliers on shelves. What is government plan to prevent this humanitarian crisis? I think we'll stop there for now, Minister.
You can ask another question because there are questions that we are covered in the statement, so we'll refer them to the statement.
Okay, I think this one, Minister, it's most are the same questions, just written differently.
Then that's sufficient. Are all the questions a rework of the same questions, just written differently?
Sorry, Mr. I didn't get that.
Are all the questions that are remaining are the same, just written differently?
Yes, if you may, Mr. I can read this one from John Elligan from New York Times. In terms of deaths and amount of damage done, is this the worst of public violence or unrest in the post-apartheid South Africa? Thank you, Minister.
Thank you for the questions. On the question, there is a misquote of the ministers and the deputy ministers. We have said these are not demonstrations, this is economic sabotage. And we have said there are perpetrators behind those questions, and the police are investigating those instigators. We cannot confirm or comment on reasons behind the instigators, where the sources are and what are the modus operandi, because that will jeopardize the investigation and successful arrest of those. So that comment will not done. We have covered the issue around the restoration of supply value chains and the reopening of N3 and N2. As we are speaking, NetJoins has been meeting and the ministers in the economic cluster, I just stepped out from there. We've been meeting with industry around the reopening, and it will happen as soon as possible. I need to clarify this allegation that food supplies will run short in 24 hours is not correct. We have been in the meeting with the industry. Food supplies are not going to run short in 24 hours. That's why there are enough food supplies to last us until the N2 and N3 is open to move the goods. Either they're in ports or they're in warehouses, and they will be moved as quickly as possible. And NetJoins, I've prioritized the reopening of the N2 and N3 and the operations of both the Richards Bay and the Durban Harbour. In terms of the questions of whether the number of deaths and the damage done is the largest since post-apartheid South Africa, we have not yet quantified that detail. When that quantification is done, we'll then communicate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Minister.
This is our last best.
Yes, Minister.
Thank you.
Kate Davis from Eyewitness News is asking, is government committed to the ongoing talks at NETLEC about establishing a disaster relief fund at the scale and efficiency of Solidarity Fund? And it also says, please respond to Business Unity SA call that there should be a 24-hour curfews in the areas affected by the anarchy until order is restored. And thank you, Mr. I think for now it's those questions.
Okay, these are the last two questions we are going to take, and then the outstanding questions, if they have not been covered in the statement or in the response, we'll deal with them tomorrow as we host the briefing to give an update. In terms of the government is committed to engage with the partners about a fund to rebuild South Africa, and we are already engaged with partners on the possibilities, but we cannot put now the specificity around the type of fund that we want to put in place. If you recall that SASRIA has come out and say they want to do a fund outside of the insurance claim for the facilities that have been damaged, but there will be work or an effort to rebuild the country, and that requires funding, and that work is being done. The ministers in the economic cluster are already working on that, but this cannot be the responsibility alone of government. Industry will have to come through, private sector will have to come through, social partners will have to come through. Every one of us as South Africans will have to give our part so that we rebuild our country and grow our country as we have already been done. As to the call of BUSA around a 24-hour curfew, that is the decision that must be made by NetJoins depending on the security situation. But as I've reported, there has been a de-escalation in Gauteng. We can say it's relatively calm. Everything will go back to normal by later today or tomorrow. Gauteng should be revving up. In KZN, compared to the incidences, if you recall, KZN incidences yesterday were very high. They were in their hundreds, but now we are in our 30s. So that shows that also stability is coming into fore, and the work of the Defence Force supporting the other law enforcement agencies taking hold. So I think we must be patient and allow the deployment of the military to stabilize the situation, and will evaluate, and the president will make a call of what are the extra measures that must be imposed in the country should that be required. If not, we'll say, how are we rebuilding our country together? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you very much to all those who participated in this media briefing. I know there might be a lot of questions that people might have wanted to ask, but as the Minister has indicated, we would be doing regular briefings, and some of the questions that you have asked will be responded to. This brings us to the end of this briefing session, and we thank you very much.